Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my ongoing lecture series. Dr. Masters talks about literature from his front porch. And as you can see, I have these shutters that I got at an estate sale that I just hung up recently. I've also got some stained glass windows that I made. Um, um, and so those are my immediate surroundings. Plus, I have three cats with me on the porch tonight. This one's Pansy. She's about to jump up. And over here, we've got the two Orange brothers, the Bobbin brothers, the identical twins. I hope that showed up. That I can't tell apart. So they used to be named Robin and Bobbin, and now they're just both named Bobbin. And that will be. Oh, hi, Pansy. She's making a guest appearance. That is going to be my bonus question about. Sorry, it's awesome. Is going to be what is the name of my oldest cat? And she's just introduced herself. That is my cat Pansy, named after there's a whole story behind why I have a cat now named Pansy, two named Bobbin, and one named Turtle, and one named Genichi. And you got to be crazy and live in a lighthouse if you want to own five cats. And well, I live on my front porch, so good enough. So I wanted to talk to you about a central element of the novel. And it also relates to a central element of any narrative text, a film, for example, which are a lot like novels, a poem, a play, etc. But our focus for this class is specifically on the novel, a longer story that is told over the course of a certain amount of time. And we expect it to be usually a longer time, several years, maybe a year. Or if it's going to take place within a week, we know that we're going to get to know everything about that particular week. And that is called narrative structure. And you're going to be writing about narrative structure in your second papers to some degree. If the thematic elements, which I just spoke about in my last lecture, are kind of the blood and the guts of a text, what does it mean? What's it trying to say to us? What are the issues that it seems to be focusing on? What are some of the predominant images and symbols of the text that we need to read? For example, gender roles in Parable of the Sower seem really interesting to me. And you have certain recurring images like fire and the walls, which I just mentioned recently. And over sort of laying those kind of core thematic elements is the narrative structure. And you can think about that as its skeleton, as its framework. And one of the first things that a novelist has to consider is, okay, what time am I wanting to set this novel in? Do I want to go 200 years in the past? Do I want to make it contemporaneous with what's going on right in the moment? Or do I want to, as Octavia Butler does as a science fiction writer, do I want to set it in the future? Like in a novel like and film like The Hunger Games, where it's imagined to be Hunger Games maybe 100 years in our future, maybe a little bit more after this big revolution has taken place. And Butler is setting her novel in our future, as a matter of fact. The first date that we see, I believe, I'd have to grab my novel really quick. I believe it is 2024. So you've got two things happening right with that. And with narrative structure, you have to think of two core elements, and that is, on the one hand, time and history. How does the movie, or the novel in this case, create a sense of time? And then you also need to consider setting or space. What kind of places does the novel take place in? Is it set in another country? Is it in France? Is it in the United States? If so, what part of the United States? If it's a rural or a urban environment, etc. So I'm going to start with time, and then we're going to move to space as the two kind of core things that make up what I call narrative structure. And we're going to start with time. And there are, as I've kind of come to define it and think through it, there are 4 different registers of time that we need to consider when we're trying to break down and understand a novel. And the first one is simply, when was it written? We know that Parable of the Sower was written in 1993. We can ask ourselves, what's going on in the early 1990s? Well, it's Generation X. Primary time. Nirvana has just released Smells Like Teen Spirit. There's a new war that's opened up in the sort of Gulf War One. All this stuff is taking place, and you can do a little historical research, which is kind of interesting. So what's going on at the time of the novel's production? Second register is, when is the novel set? What is the time in which the characters are doing the things that they do and the world is acting on them in the way that it is? And Octavia Butler makes a really interesting choice as a science fiction writer and says, I'm going to put my novel written in 1993, could be 92, I think it's 93, and I'm going to set it 30 years into the future, which is actually our present day, right? So that the first date we see in the novel is 2024. And so that's the initial setting of the novel. Now we get to our third register, which is, over what time period do the events of the narrative actually occur. And in this case, because we've got a first-person narrator who's presenting us with her journal, we know that the novel takes place over approximately 3.5 years, from her first dated entry in 2024 till her final dated entry in 2027. And so that constitutes what we might call a narrative's present tense. So we're still in number 3. This is, over what time span does the narrative take place and operate within? Oh, there's one of the cats having a cat fight. And what is going on as the novel moves forward in time? The fourth register, the final one, is plot structure. So we've had, when was it written? When was it set? What is the narrative's present tense? Over how much time does the narrative span? And the fourth one is the actual plot structure. Is it purely linear? And a journal kind of suggests that it's fairly linear, right? We get her day-by-day account of her life. But the plot structure isn't purely linear, because we learn so much about her childhood. We know that she was born, for example, in approximately, what would that be, 2009, and that she was born with a condition because of what her mother did. We learn about the history of the walled city. So these are all told in flashbacks. So we're going backwards sometimes as we're still moving forward. So plot structure refers to the linearity of the text and the kinds of flashbacks we see, and sometimes even the flash forwards that we get. So those are our 4 registers of time within a narrative's structure. Part 2 is space, and that is what I'm going to save for my next lecture, which is all part of narrative structure, time and space. The third lecture, well, actually the fourth in this series, is going to be on narrative voice and narrative perspective, so I haven't forgotten that. So there you have, within narrative structure, the first key thing, which is narrative time. 4 registers. Okay. Bye.